Good afternoon, Wabash. Over the past 3 years of my Wabash College experience, the biggest lie I ever told was that I could not study abroad. Regardless of whoever asked me, and for whatever reason, my answer stayed the same. I just can't do it. But that opportunity was one of the best that I've ever been presented with. As a Spanish minor interested in studying Hispanic cultures, I would have been able to immerse myself in another country and come out a better person. So why was I so insistent on lying? Well, the reason was I was afraid to learn. And I don't mean in the technical or academic sense. I mean that I was afraid to learn that I didn't know everything, that I would always be ignorant of something. And when you realize this, you come to understand that you will never always have control. So, if you ask anybody who knows me on campus what my interests are, they might say a lot of the same things, right? I'm interested in law, debate, being a little obnoxious. But I'm also interested in my hometown of South Bend, like a lot, and maybe even a little too much. In fact, as we're speaking, I have the flag of the city hanging up in my dorm room right now. My ultimate goal in life is to eventually return and make the city, as the Parks Department would say, more livable and more lovable. But where does this interest come from, and why am I so bent on returning? Well, for the longest time, I had literally no idea. I thought maybe the people, the culture, the fact that it's right next to Notre Dame, I mean, all of these things were true in their own respect, but they never felt like the full picture. It felt like something was missing, and that's because something was. You see, in great part, I love South Bend so much because it's all that I ever knew growing up. It's predictable. Every time I go home over the summer, I know where I'm at, I know what's going to happen. I know who the people are, what the streets look like. I know where I'm going and where I'm at all times. That feeling is empowering. It makes me feel in control. I feel like I'm on top of everything and I know what I'm doing. And when I realized this, a whole lot of other habits of mine started to make sense. You see, I'm a very repetitive person. I do practically the same thing every day. I drink the same drinks, I eat the same food, watch the same shows, read the same books, so on, so forth. And I realize that I do this, and I'm this painfully repetitive person because if I did anything else, I would risk losing control over my life. When I wake up at 7 a.m. and I go to the brew and I get a pink lemonade Lotus, and if you aren't from here, you probably don't know what I'm saying, but if I do that, I feel empowered. I know it's going to taste good. I know that I'm going to feel caffeinated. If I eat the same meal every day, I know it's going to taste good. I'll feel satiated. If I do anything else, I'm risking that I lose power. I can't predict what the outcome will be. And that to me is terrifying. It's overwhelming. In fact, a lot of other things I do started to click as well. I have these little habits to try to control things that I do not have control over. Once I turn in an exam, I can prep as much as I want, but as soon as that submission button is clicked, it is outside of my control what happens. But I came up with a master plan. I knock on wood. I'm good to go. Or if that fails, I wear lucky socks, like I'm doing right now. Because if I don't wear them, I'm going to say something silly up here and be embarrassed for the rest of my life. Obviously, that's not the case, and it's not really true, but I buy into it so much that I feel like I have control over what I'm doing. So when I'm presented with an opportunity to travel to another country for a whole semester, I'm obviously going to turn it down because I would physically confront the fact that my knowledge of the world is so tiny, and I have absolutely no idea how really anything works except for the little small bits of knowledge I've gained in my short 20 years of life. But I don't want to make this sound like it's a story about fearing culture shock or fearing social anxiety, and I hope it doesn't sound like I'm just having a quarter-life crisis, but that may be the case. What this is, instead, is a story about how to overcome the fear of not knowing. So what we're going to do is break this down to a few parts here. I'm going to talk about what knowledge even is, because we can't even agree on its definition. Then I'll talk about the liberal arts approach and why it's beneficial. And finally, I'll present a story that explains the negative side effects of not trying to apply the liberal arts method to learning. So perpetual ignorance is the term that I'm using, but what I mean by that is you are always ignorant of something. You will never know everything because it's not possible. And so when we talk about what knowledge is, we see that there are a variety of different definitions. Berkeley says it's usually referring to text, images, data, but other specimens and objects can also be informative. The Cambridge Dictionary says that it's understanding of or information about a subject, usually learned by study or experience, by one person or by many. And of course, with all things, philosophy throws its hat in the ring, and we see Mr. Alan White describe it as the ability to produce the correct answer to a possible question. What's important here is not the definitions themselves, but the fact that there are so many. It speaks to the breadth of knowledge, just how much there is to know. And in fact, if we want to quantify this, we can see that 2.5 quintillion bytes, or digitized pieces of information, are produced every single day. That's 1.7 megabytes a second. So regardless of how hard you try, regardless of what you study, you will never know it all. And when I think about this, it becomes daunting, depressing. Why be a student if I'm only going to learn a fraction of what there is to know? It doesn't seem worth it. But that's where the liberal arts approach comes in. And to explain what the liberal arts approach is, I want to open with a story from one of my classes from last semester. So as a Spanish minor, I have to take a course on Spanish poetry. And while it's fairly interesting, it's not something I'll wake up in the morning and go, oh, it's time for Spanish poetry. I'm all excited. But what was exciting and what was even more interesting was the way that it was taught. Our professor and our class, at the very end of the semester, we talked about a poem that talked about La Bruma, or the fog. And so when I read La Bruma, I think, well, obviously I know what this means, I know what it is, right? I've seen it, hot summer day after a rainy evening. But I didn't really understand the full picture, or why it was especially important, because the poem took place in Quito, Ecuador. So my professor explained the literal physics of fog. He went over the actual math about how fog is created, how its density works, how it gets more dense in different environments. He used physics to explain a concept in Spanish poetry. Two different areas of knowledge that I would never expect to collide, but it happened. And as a result, my knowledge of the poem was a lot greater. I understood its significance to a degree that I would not have otherwise. And so what I see here in the liberal arts approach is my professor acknowledging that the divisions we create between different subjects are arbitrary. Everything is interconnected. Everything relates to another thing, and so on. Our divisions and the way we divide things up, even on campus, right? We have a building, Goodrich. That's the math building. We have Detchen. That's the foreign language building. We have designated locations to study these subjects because it's too much to do it all. It's too much to try and combine them all. But it matters because when I think about my own interests in returning to South Bend, I try to think about ways I can prepare myself, so to speak, right? I'll study political science. That's a pretty clear connection between the two. But understanding the liberal arts method, it makes me realize that I have to know math. You need to know chemistry, physics, history, rhetoric. I mean, everything matters when running a city. You cannot have just one field at play. And so understanding this made me realize that maybe all the knowledge in the world that I see as overwhelming is actually a lot more related than it appears. And so while physics is over here, and I'm petrified of taking a physics course, you'll never see me do it, and you have Spanish poetry over here that I find fairly interesting, I would never think, no, these two things can't be connected. It's not possible. It's not reasonable. But they are. And so by taking a little bit from a different field that you may feel unempowered in, you can find ways to broaden your field of expertise. And this is what it comes down to. I mean, imagine that this carpet is what I'm comfortable in. Political science, rhetoric, Spanish. This is my field of expertise. I feel the best here. And it's great to feel the best. It's great to feel empowered. We need experts in fields to make the world run. But as soon as anything I perceive as being outside of this field, I shut down. I get scared. I deny some of the greatest opportunities that have ever been presented to me. But let's say, for example, you're thinking, well, look, that's great, but I don't really have the time to go out and try to learn everything. Well, knowledge can be acquired in many different ways, and that's what's important to think about. If you have never been to Salter Hall before, you've sat down and said, hey, this chair is pretty comfortable. You have gained the knowledge of what that chair feels like. You've gained the knowledge of what these lights look like, what my voice sounds like. You're gaining knowledge through tiny little actions that you aren't even thinking about. And if you're anything like me, and I binge scroll on YouTube a little bit too much, you might think that, oh, I'm wasting my time doing this. I mean, I could be reading a book. But you don't have to gain knowledge by taking on large tasks like breaking down an encyclopedia or doing a research paper. In fact, one of my favorite videos is, can 50,000 magnets stop a cannonball? I'll watch that, and it's fairly interesting. It doesn't, by the way. It's kind of disappointing. But am I ever going to use the knowledge of magnets and cannonballs in my day-to-day life? Probably not. But let me view this video in a sort of a different light. It's a piece of media produced by somebody who's trying to get my attention, and they succeeded. I clicked on the video, and I sat through the whole thing. They succeeded. What did they do? Well, they employed ideas of rhetoric, advocacy, speaking, editing, videography. They use all these other skills that I'm not really paying attention to, but that are a part of my experience, that I can gain just by doing it. And so when I look at that video that may be a silly waste of time, I can say, well, what are the bits of advocacy skills that I can gain from this, so that I might return to South Bend one day and maybe employ those skills to advocate for better policy or different systems. That's the idea. It's taking every opportunity presented to you, or trying, and saying, what is the most valuable part of this? What can I gain? Even though I don't know what it is and I'm uncomfortable with it, how can I approach this and expand my field of expertise so that I feel more empowered throughout the day, so that I feel more powerful when I'm doing difficult tasks and people depend on me? That's the idea. So application, sort of jack-of-all-trades story that I have to explain what I mean by the negative side effects of not applying knowledge and not taking the opportunity to gain what's valuable. Starts with a club I'm a part of. So I'm a treasurer of an Hispanic Latino society on campus known as La Alianza Unidos por Sangre. Now, I do not come from Hispanic or Latino roots. I'm not Hispanic or Latino myself. And so when I was elected to be the treasurer of this important and large club, I was petrified. I was nervous. I was like freaking out. I was like, I'm going to drop the ball. Someone's going to be like, oh, this guy messed it up again. Look at him go. I mean, come on. That was just eating me away constantly every day that I have been treasurer. So what did I do? Well, I focused on my circle of expertise. I honed in on the numbers, right? Numbers, being a treasurer, they work pretty well. Did I get a lot of money from Student Senate? Well, hey, I did my job pretty well. Did we get a lot of followers on Instagram? Hey, well, then good on me, get myself a gold star. Here's the problem. La Alianza is not about the numbers. It's not about these arbitrary numbers that I'm creating in my head to gauge my success or the club's success. It's not about that. It's about the culture. It's about sharing experiences with your brothers that you love. It's about gaining new experiences together, seeing what you can do to help the community, seeing what you can do to lift each other up. That's what it's about, and I completely ignored it just so that I felt comfortable. So a part of being treasurer is that you're kind of the unspoken grill master. I don't say that I grill very well, but they'll have me do it. And a lot of the times, I'll have to go pick up groceries from a local market. So for one event, I had to feed around 50 people. I had to cook up about 10 pounds of fajitas with some of my brothers. So I went to the store to get all these groceries, and I'm given a very clear list, clear as day. So I'm going down my list, and I'm reading everything off, and I'm picking up the groceries, and I get to the refrigerated section on my way out, and I see on my list salsa, and on the right-hand side, $5. And I thought, yeah, this is pretty simple, pretty standard. I know what that is. But I get to the refrigerated section, and I see that salsa is unfortunately marked at $6. Well, what happens to also be marked as $5? Well, the pico de gallo. Now, I know the difference, and you got to believe me, because some people don't. They're abundantly different, night and day, right? But in my mind, I'm thinking, wait, I can't mess this up. This is an important event, and I need to buy, the correct item. So do I go with the name of the item or the price? The price, because that makes the most sense. And I say, no, they didn't want salsa for this. They want a pico de gallo. So I buy it, cook up the food, and I bring it. And then someone says to me, Seth, where's the salsa? And I said, salsa, didn't you mean pico de gallo? And he goes, did I write pico de gallo? And I said, well, no. And he goes, then what are you doing? We do not have any ingredients here that go with pico de gallo. You've completely botched it. And that was terrifying to me. And they were thinking, like, well, do you not know the difference? Should we send people with you? And I was like, no. I do know the difference. You got to trust me here. And so this story is a little silly, maybe not entirely serious, but it's the exact manifestation of what I'm trying to articulate here. I was so invested, so dead set and hyper-fixated on staying within my circle of empowerment, my circle of expertise, that I literally changed what reality was. I made one dish another dish just to fit my narrative, just to fit within my circle of expertise. It was only to the benefit of me feeling more comfortable. That was it. I denied facts just to get on by with my day. And so, when you deny opportunities to apply a liberal arts method and think, how can I incorporate different fields of knowledge into what I'm most comfortable with, you may lose out on opportunities that'll better you. I've changed this approach. I've changed my hyperfixation on numbers to now focusing on how can I best share these experiences with my hermanos? How can I enjoy the time with them? Right? And a lot of that takes me admitting, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing. I do not know what pen dulces are. Can you please, let's just go as a group, right? And it's been phenomenal. It's been a change. Admitting that I don't know something has been better than me denying it and running, because I can just tell them I'm not sure. Nobody's mad. It's a supportive environment. And so now every time we do cooking, we'll go as a group. We'll do things, and it's a lot more fun, a lot more enjoyable. I've been able to bond with them in a way that I wasn't sure I could beforehand. And all it took was me getting out of my circle of comfort, my circle of empowerment, and trying something else, admitting that I didn't know. And so what I'm telling you today is not to try every opportunity that's ever presented to you. That's not practical. That's not reasonable. That's too much. And I acknowledge that. But what I am saying is, if an opportunity is presented to you, consider what would happen if you didn't take it. Consider what would happen if you ran away, like I did, from studying abroad. Would this better me? Or would it be better for me to acknowledge that I don't know, try to gain something valuable for my own day-to-day life, and become a better person as a result of it? A reason to broaden the circle of expertise. So what I leave you with, maybe a little one-liner before I step off, is this. The idea of today's talk is simply, be an expert in your world, but a student everywhere else. Thank you.